Hello, the world. This is me, Henry Keane, on UATV English channel. And today I have a special guest. All our guests are special as usual. John Herbst, former US ambassador to Ukraine and Uzbekistan, senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Hello, dear sir. Hello. Right. So that might be too naive for me. Forgive me. But still, what do you even expect from this summit? I mean, NATO summit right now. Do I have to expect anything?
Well, I think there will be some small steps towards making the Ukraine-NATO relationship closer. Steps like giving NATO the lead role in the Ramstein process of providing arms to Ukraine, maybe opening a NATO office in Ukraine. I don't think we'll see stronger steps that I would like to see. For example, putting a Ukrainian ambassador on the North Atlantic Council, allowing Ukrainian officials to work in the NATO apparatus, setting up a NATO training mission in Ukrainian territory. I'd be surprised if any of those things happened. So we'll see small steps in the direction of closer Ukrainian-NATO cooperation. I'm more optimistic that we may see some announcements relating to advanced arms. Biden had told Zelensky in public at the G7 that Ukraine should expect 5 Patriot batteries in the near future. There are some indications we may have announcements about that this week. There are already news reports about a Patriot battery going from Romania and a Patriot battery going from Germany to Ukraine. That would be a clear step forward. And of course, we have reports of many Bradley fighting vehicles and Abrams tanks going to Ukraine now, and of finally F-16s going from the Netherlands to Ukraine. So that, I would say, is a positive for the summit, but the NATO-Ukraine element is not very strong. It's disappointing.
Well, I mean, please help me to understand. I mean, you say small steps. Why small steps? Where does it end finally? When would be the big steps taken? When what are these big steps?
Sadly, I don't know. The big step, of course, is simply inviting Ukraine to become a member, beginning negotiations. We offered I would say, a substantial half measure, we meaning scholars and former officials with whom I'm associated, last fall, when we suggested inviting Ukraine to begin NATO accession talks as opposed to simply joining the alliance. But even that was considered to be too provocative a step for the White House and the Chancery in Berlin. And that's unfortunate. Sadly, American policy, while basically adequate to the challenge of Putin's aggression in Ukraine, is timid because they've been threatened by, and they take much too seriously, Putin's warnings of nuclear escalation. Obviously, you cannot ignore such warnings, but to allow that to deter you from taking clear steps that strengthen American security is a serious error. And sadly, that's what we see both in Washington and in Berlin.
Indeed. All right. Well, today, Western experts, if I may say experts, wrote an open letter. And the title is "The NATO Alliance Should Not Invite Ukraine In." Do you agree with this?
I read that letter. It's unimpressive in its argumentation. It's loud on assertions, not so strong on expertise or argumentation. Absolutely. And it's noticeable that letter is signed overwhelmingly by academics who have not had much real-world experience. There is one former senator.
Well, I have a feeling that this letter was written by Putin himself. And what you, as a diplomat, how to deal with this? What do we do as Ukraine? How to react? And do we have to react at all?
I have organized many letters written by senior former officials. We read that letter and decided it was so weak it didn't require much of a response. I don't think it's having any real impact.
Well, okay, I will take this as an answer, but I would also like to talk about the upcoming US presidential elections. Obviously, we all know that it's not yet known who will win, but you, personally, what do you expect after November 2024?
I am not certain who will win. The momentum appears to be on Trump's side, but there's still many. Well, first, there's a long time to the actual vote. Secondly, there are many wild cards in this election, including the fact that Trump was convicted in a New York court. A conviction which cuts both ways, because on the one hand, it still means he's a convicted criminal. On the other hand, many Americans see that court as illegitimate or extremely biased against Trump. But how that plays out, especially with independent voters, is hard to predict. There's some indication. Trump's poll numbers went up after that verdict and also after the debate last week. But it's also true that hesitancy among independent voters, who are really important to vote for Trump, has also gone up since the conviction in New York City. So it's just hard to predict. So let me answer your question in two parts. If Biden wins, or if Biden steps aside and you have Harris, I think you'll see more of the same. A policy which is overall sound, but too timid, not bold enough to truly advance American interests and to help Ukraine win. And if Trump wins, I'm just not sure what will happen. It will depend upon who his advisors are and what Trump's instincts are as he makes decisions. He has taken steps in the last several months suggesting his policies are not the same as his loudest supporters, whose naivete on Russia and willingness to throw Ukraine to the wolves are notable. I'm thinking of people like J.D. Vance or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or Chip Roy. But Trump himself appeared to have given at least an amber light, a yellow light, if not a green light, to Speaker Johnson, to push the aid package for Ukraine. And Trump himself said that Ukraine's survival is important to the United States. So what will Trump policies be if he wins? Hard to say.
Well, I mean, this is the cost of democracy, isn't it? That's what freedom costs. You don't know.
Yes.
So,
well, in theory, you could.
In practice,
but Trump.
He's a
Trump
convicted. I'm sorry, but he's a convicted criminal. Still, he has a chance. He found this way through the laws, and here we go.
Correct.
So, but this is the cost of democracy. This is the freedom. We have to expect something like this that can happen. But let me talk about something else. Let me talk about something very concrete. The very missile that blasted the children's hospital was fired from Russian fighter jet. A jet fighting children. That is Putin's message to the world. Clearly, that's what it is. So being straightforward, what goddamn else should happen so the world let us defend ourselves, I mean Ukraine, and let us use the weapon you gave us to save our children and hit Russian military bases, for example, where Russian military bases are located, in Russia?
This highlights the inadequacies of the Biden team's policy. They have let Russian nuclear threats deter them from taking sensible steps. Whether it was giving Ukraine the arms that might have led to a serious Ukrainian breakthrough in their counteroffensive last year, and now maintaining feckless restrictions on the use of American weapons. Putin chose to attack, as he did yesterday, to underscore weakness of NATO as it convenes for its 75th anniversary summit in Washington. And sadly, it looks like Putin made a good bet, because the spokesman at the White House yesterday, John Kirby, said there'd be no change in the feckless American restrictions on the use of its weapons, even after that hospital strike. I don't rule out a change in American policy, because that policy is so foolish. But if that policy does not change this week, Putin will have won a propaganda victory by having conducted the strike while NATO convenes and is helpless in responding.
Well, if I may, is there any way that we can make NATO react differently?
Well, you have a strong delegation here in Washington right now. Speaker Stefanchuk spoke out very strongly yesterday about the need to remove these restrictions. Sadly, he was saying at the same time that Kirby was reiterating this feckless Biden policy. But over time, the administration, while it has been intimidated by Russian nuclear threats, it also can be nudged when it's criticized strongly for its weak policies. And I think we may yet see a change in this policy. I just hope it happens this week.
I can't hope more with you. So thank you so very much for your time with us and for your expertise. I'll remind you, our audience, that today my guest was John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and Uzbekistan, senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Stay safe and stay tuned.